Hello everybody, welcome to episode number 15 of the BIVBlog, Benedict's IT video blog. My name is still Benedict Stockerbrand, and no, today I won't tell you how to create and optimize binary install images for network installations, but instead I'll tell you how to modify and update and fix a couple problems with the PXE network rescue boot system I've built in the previous episode, because while I built a couple installation images and I could install them in a sort of simple setup, I actually ran into a few problems with the rescue system that I hadn't anticipated. I had to sort them out, and that actually turned out to be way more of effort and way more changes than I actually thought. Actually, what happened was basically this. I wanted to put the actual installation images on a separate NFS share, just because I wanted to keep them separate from the particular installation system. No big surprise, so put them in the different NFS share, export the NFS share, add a line to the ETCFS tab in the rescue system, and try again. And it didn't work. Why not? First problem was that on Linux, at least on Debian, ETC-mtab is meant to be a symlink to proc mounts. That should be generally the case in with Linux. But at least Debian doesn't set up the symlink during installation, but that job is left to the init scripts. And since I export the NFS root file system read-only, they have a bit of a problem there. So things work until I try to mount something else, because then the mount command can't access ETC-mtab because it's not there. So I did that manually and things still didn't work. Next problem I ran into was that var is not mounted read-write. Now, var is meant to be mounted read-write, and if you've watched the previous episode carefully, you've probably seen some warnings and errors flicker by during the boot process, but things so far worked. And if the MTA minds that I can't start, I can't do anything with var, fine with me, because I don't need an MTA on the rescue system. So at that point I had a bit of a problem. What did I do? I created var as a memory file system, and things still didn't work. And I also added temp as a memory file system, but still things didn't work. Why? Because var wasn't properly populated. So I hacked up the init scripts to populate var from a tarball that I had created on the server side, and at that point things started to work, except that for some reason that I couldn't really figure out, and I simply didn't want to spend all that much time in, if I put the binary image volume in the FS tab, it wouldn't get mounted. So I've been jumping through one hoop after another to make this work, and when that happens, there are two things that I consider important to do. First thing is make sure that this is reproducible, so whatever I do, I can do it again without having to do it manually. And I'll show you that how I've done it using a makefile in my case. But before that, the other thing is that if you run into these sorts of problems, you want to make sure that you're not on a wild goose chase. So the question here is, are there other simpler options to deal with this? Now, what options could I think of? I mean, what I normally do in these situations, if possible, turn off the computer, take some scrap paper and sit somewhere and just try to sort everything out and come up with the options. So first thing, there's no way around DHCP. What can be done is that I can tell the DHCP server, for this MAC address provide this configuration, for that address provide some different configuration. Pain in the ass, and something I'd really like to avoid, because I want people to be able to boot the machine over the net and then say interactively, I want this image. So it is still an option if there's no other way to deal with the situation, but it's something I really want to avoid. Next step, PXE Linux. Very nice, very powerful, because you get a choice of things, so that's really exactly what I need, except that I haven't found a way to boot anything but Linux. Well, yeah, I can sort of boot things, but it doesn't really work with the memory image of a CD-ROM drive. So that's not really that nice a solution. It might be possible to boot, for example, FreeBSD that way, but it'll take a day or two to get that to work, and that's probably not worth it either. So I'm stuck with PXE Linux because I really want these menus. And at that point, it's also obvious I'm pretty much stuck with Linux at this point. Unless I decide to go all the way to FreeBSD, where I don't have PXE Linux, but add some additional configuration on the DHCP server side, which is a pain if I have to boot different systems. So the next question is, does it have to be Debian? Maybe some other Linux distribution can actually deal properly with a read-only root file system like FreeBSD can. And no, I haven't tried, because trying out all of them is likely quite a bit of work, and the chances that I get something that actually works are limited. Now, if I had a student, intern, somebody who wants to learn things, I'd probably say, okay, build me a read-only root file system, Linux system from scratch, but I know that takes weeks. Done something like this, what, 20 years ago or so, or 15 years, yeah, or rather more than 15 years, 15, 16 years ago, and it takes weeks. You learn a hell of a lot if you do that, so if you want to learn how Unix really works, by all means do it, but don't expect it to be something you can do in your lunch break. So I stuck with the decision to go with Debian and fix it in such a way that it can actually use a read-only mounted root file system, at least to the point that I need. And I wrote a makefile to sort out all the steps that I've done. Now, I know there are a lot of system administrators who are not really comfortable with Make. It's admittedly not the nicest tool, but it gets the job done. And I am familiar with it, so it's okay for me. If you rather want to use Puppet or whatever, go for it. Fine with me. I don't use Puppet at this point because this particular machine is not managed by Puppet. It doesn't make much sense because I take this machine with me on the road, and if I have to do anything on the road when it's Puppet managed, I'd have to take the Puppet server with me as well. So this machine is a bit of an oddball. Anyway, it was so many changes that I'm not even sure I memorized them all right now. So I suggest we take a quick look and I'll show you what I've done. So here we go. Here's the makefile. First thing you always want to do is somehow make sure you know who wrote it and when. And I just use a stupid copyright notice in there just for the fun of it. First thing is, I've given the PXE target a name installer, like Wheezy in the menu. It's just a completely new install. So when I boot a virtual machine, I can choose between installer and Wheezy as rescue system. I've had to put in the location of the install images, and I've set a couple phony targets to do things. Now, the important things I had to do was first set up the NFS root file system, and I've done this using the bootstrap like we've seen in the previous episode. And the makefile magic here is just to make sure that I can rerun this stuff without having to wait 10 minutes for the bootstrap to finish again. I've also installed a kernel package. Now, that might be unnecessary, but generally speaking it's useful because that way I can ensure that the kernel installed in the TFTP directory actually matches with the one with the rest of the system. So I've had to install a couple extra packages. Absolutely necessary was NFS common, and while I was at it I also added bzip2, LZOP, which are additional compression decompression programs, OpenSSH server, and less. And by the way, I had to resort setting etc resolve conf because these are network things done from some official service and otherwise it wouldn't work. Then I sorted out the root password like we've seen in the previous episode, except that I do it here using the password command. I fixed the mtab, so I created the symlink at this point, and then what I did was create tarball var.tgz and extract that and archive whatever is in the var file system on the root file system, or on the NFS root. And then things got really ugly. The etc init.d/mountall script had problems, so I had to update it. More specifically, it had to be extended to create or to populate the var file system from the tarball I've created above here. Further up. And I've added a few lines into that script and it's copied to the target system. Okay, here's where it created the tarball. So I fixed up the mountall script and no, this one. Then I created a FS tab which contained, first of all, a warning that this was automatically generated. Always a good idea if you create files automatically. I added var and temp as memory file systems, and that was for standard Diskless installation. If I install an installer, it looks pretty much the same, except that I also add a line to mount the NFS share with the install images. And because this doesn't get mounted, despite the fact that it's now in the FS tab, I also had to clobber the etc rc local script, copy it from another file which actually does something. Normally the script doesn't do anything at all. Basically what I do is mount all NFS file systems. So that's that. Then I did a few more things to the system to allow me to install images, but that will be topic for the next episode. I copied the kernel and initrd to the TFTP directory, and well, created the default txt file through the script. Yeah, okay, I can clean up things again. That's quite a bit of work, a lot of small funny things, and if you try to do these every couple of years or so, you're bound to forget things, and how did I do that last time, and what have I changed? And so these makefiles are just tremendously helpful, especially so because next time Debian comes out with another major release, things in there are going to break. So You really want to have something to start with and then fix things as necessary. And if it wasn't for the fact that this is only run in a sort of trusted environment, I wouldn't even bother to do these changes, because if I have to update that every time I do a system upgrade, that would be just a tremendous amount of work and lots of money going in there, and it's just not worth the trouble. In this particular case, however, I'm reasonably comfortable with it. So at this point, well, I'm not really happy with it, but it's probably the best solution for me at this point. Doesn't have to be the best solution for you. There's always another way to do something in an even sillier way. But if you want to set up a system like this, I hope this gives you a bit of an idea about the problems you can run into and how to deal with them. Now, one more thing maybe. Why didn't I just go for FreeBSD, where I know from previous experience that it can handle read-only root file system. It automatically populates a memory file system var. You don't even have to do anything about it. Maybe one configuration line where you tell it, okay, do this, but unless I'm quite mistaken, it actually detects it's got an NFS root file system, and the root file system is read-only mounted and can't be read-write mounted, and then it does these things automatically, and they actually do work. Yeah, might be an option. And if I already knew for sure that I can get everything I need with using binary installation images only, I might actually go that way. But I want to keep a couple options open. I want to be able to use PXE Linux, and if necessary even convince FreeBSD to boot through it. I still guess it's possible, but it's going to be quite a bit of work again. And what if I have to use some sort of not binary image installation thing for whatever reason at some point? If I go with FreeBSD at this point, I have a real problem. Another problem that FreeBSD has is that it doesn't support Xen. So if I don't find any other way to install things, what I can probably do in a lot of cases is use this existing framework, make it run within a Xen hypervisor, and then start whatever system I want to install in a Xen virtual machine, pass the disk into the virtual machine and run installation within the virtual machine. But ugly approach, and probably a real pain to set up and a pain to use, but it's another option I don't just want to give up at this point. So this is one of those things. You have to pick the least possible evil for your particular purposes, and otherwise keep as many options open to you as you can. That's very basic system administration, system architecture thing, really. Anyway, so much about this update on the PXE boot system. Next thing I'm going to talk about actually is about the install images I've done. Hope you liked it. If you did, give it a thumbs up on YouTube. If you want to discuss, come over to the forum at www.stepladder-it.com/bivblog/15 at this time. And in any case, hopefully see you soon again. Bye.